Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. On today's video, we're going to be installing this budget mini split I got from Yitahome. I think I paid like 420 bucks for this thing on sale, and it pretty much is a throwaway unit. So on today's video, I'll go through all the steps to do a DIY install on this in a garage. If you saw one of my old videos, I did a Pioneer system for my fourth area of my garage, the shop side of it. But over here in the single car side where the other cars, I wasn't getting enough coverage, so I figured I was going to supplement it with this system right here. It'll really help cool down the garage really quick versus me putting fans up to move the air around. So in today's video, we'll go ahead and go through all the steps on getting this in, so stay tuned. So I got this unit from Yitahome on Slick Deals. This thing was 420 bucks for the 240 volt version. It's got that new refrigerant, the A2L refrigerant that's slightly flammable. It's an R32 refrigerant, which is going to be very common going forward. The R410 is being phased out, so you won't really find many of that anymore. So you're going to have to go with this new refrigerant. So we got this here. We'll go ahead and open it in a second and we'll see what's inside. In addition, for our project, we're going to need a Lineset cover. So this thing is a turbo set. This is a 14 or 16 foot set. I used it on my previous install with the Pioneer and I really liked it. It was the best value as far as the cost and how much you got. For this install, I won't need the whole section or all the pieces, but I figured it was the same price as ordering a short one. So I just ordered this 14 foot one and we'll go ahead and use most of it, but anything left over I could use it as spares for my old system or for some other project. So on this system, I'll go ahead and wall mount it versus ground mounting it compared to what I did with the Pioneer. I bought this bracket set right here to do the wall, so we'll go ahead and hang that on the wall so we can hang the outdoor unit. One of the things for this whole DIY is you're going to need a vacuum pump to vacuum the Lineset once you're done installing it. I went ahead and borrowed this from AutoZone. It's a free rental from them. You just need to leave like a $200 deposit. Since you don't really use this often, that's the best way to go about it. These things are like $100 on Amazon if you want to buy one and own one yourself, or you just want to rent it for a couple days from here. Luckily, my AutoZone had a brand new one, so this thing is actually brand new in the box. It has fresh new oil and everything, no leaks, none of that. So that's going to be very useful. Keep in mind, if you rent one of these, make sure you keep it upright. If you lay it down like I did for my previous project on my car, all the oil is going to leak out of the cap. So just make sure you keep it upright. So before we got started on this job, I had to run all the electrical for this. So I basically had to run it through the CMU wall up to the ceiling there and then kind of cut through so I could put it all through the CMU and hide everything. You can see I drilled a few holes down here to try to find a spot to go through. I ended up getting unlucky on my first 2 tries and I ended up hitting solid concrete. So it looks like that little section right there of the CMU, which was only like half of it, was filled up all the way through. Usually they do that because there's like a structural member in there or some kind of rod that holds the house down. So that one was actually filled in. So I made a wrong choice there. So I tested 2 others. I went a little bit too far over, did that hole and decided not to use that, and then tested again for the middle hole and finally got that one. So I went through to the outside and you can see I actually did 1 hole over here. That was that first one I hit and was solid. So it wasn't anything that was useful. So I ended up filling it back up and I cut this second hole over here. I ended up putting the gang box in there, filling it with spray foam just to seal it all up, and then running all the wires through. Up top, I ended up drilling that hole on the same channel, the same path, so I could do the disconnect. So on this side of the garage, I had a sub panel with a 20 amp right here, which I'm going to use for the air conditioning, and that also shares the same circuit with my lift. Both of these don't use that high of an amperage or draw when it's running, so that should be perfect to share that one. And then the outlet, I'm just going to share off the 20 amp that I already have with all my other outlets. It's actually piggybacked off this GFCI right here on the inside, but I'm installing a secondary GFCI on the outside just in case. Even though I can just go ahead and just run it straight through with a water resistant outlet, I'm just going to put a secondary one out there. So for the disconnect, I'm just using this 60 amp non-fusible I got down at the local home improvement store. This thing's only like $15, so it's all you really need for this. 60 amp just means the maximum. It's not a fusible, it's more of a disconnect for service. So it's fine to use a 60 amp. That's not really the rated overcurrent. So we already got that hole over there sealed up on that side. So all I need to do is just punch the knockout on here, mount it to there, and then just hang it on there. The top one is a little hook with a hole, and you just hook it down, and the bottom one is a set screw, so you could choose multiple holes to set that into there. There's 3 of them at the bottom, so I'm just going to use the middle one for this case. So I went ahead and knocked that knockout right there through. I put an anti-short bushing from the back side, since this thing's pretty long, so when you do it from the front side it actually interferes, so you want to do it from the back to the front. I also had a short bushing right there in the wall, even though I didn't really need it. I just wanted to make sure that it was there. All right, we got that mounted over here, so go ahead and tap these 2 into the line and line. You see I have the white here. I have to actually wrap this with a red electrical tape because this is going to be a 2 hot, which makes 240, and then the ground. I use this wire, which you can use as long as you mark it on both ends. On the other side where I terminated it, I already put the red electrical tape on there, or red heat shrink, to identify it. But on this side I'm gonna have to do the same once I make those terminations into this line and line right here. Then your unit is going to connect on the outside once we come in from the bottom here. On the top here, what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and seal this up with some caulk all around the sides here. I'm going to leave the bottom open just for drainage in case it gets moisture back here, but on the side and the top I want to seal that with some caulk and then just paint the whole thing to match. This is how I want it to look at the end right here. This is my main air conditioning disconnect. Same with my other mini split on that side. I did the same as far as caulking it and just doing all that and then painting it. This was already done when I built the house. I copied it for the mini split I did previously, so I'm gonna copy it for this one too. For the bottom here, I'm gonna go ahead and trim off all this expanding foam and go ahead and terminate this. I want to paint around the edges here before I do that, just to make sure everything's cleaned up, even though I'm gonna spray it once I'm done up here too to match the same color. All right, went ahead and sealed around that edge right there with some silicone caulk. Let that thing dry for a day or so, and then I'll paint this thing. So this is unrelated to the install, but I'm going to show you guys a little bit of something on these GFCIs right here. This is a water resistant, tamper proof one. So on the back here, you'll see there's 2 things. There's one that says line and then one that says load or charge, right? So what you can do on this is basically the line comes from your breaker, and you could daisy chain other non-GFCIs down here on the load and the charge side. So those things still act as GFCIs. So whenever something grounds out or faults out, it'll trip this thing and it'll shut everything down the line. A lot of new houses these days, especially the restrooms, only have one of these because they're like 15 to 20 bucks, and then they daisy chain it to the other restrooms. That's why you don't see this thing, and you got to track down where it's at if you trip it in one of the other rooms. Also, when you're doing this, you want to avoid using these push-in connectors right here. You're just asking for trouble when you use those. Usually what I do is I loop around the outside here, and I screw it down to the bolt. That way it's a nice secure connection and it doesn't come loose. The only thing different with the GFCIs though, with these quick connects, is that you actually have to screw these down to lock them in. So they're actually a little bit better than your traditional push-in ones that use compression fitting. All right, so we made the connections, as you can see right there. So the gold side always goes with the black, which is the hot, and the silver side always goes with the white. You also want to do it, if you do this loop method, make sure you're doing it looping through clockwise, so that way when you tighten it down, it actually holds and rolls that thing up instead of splitting it out. Got it screwed in, just got to put the weatherproof NEMA 3 cover on it, and we're good to go with that outlet. Go ahead and finish up this connection over here, and then we'll get the mini split put in. All right, I put that cover on. I went ahead and put a little bit of silicone all around the edges, just like I did with that top box, just because I didn't trust that neoprene gasket right there to fully seal, especially if this wall gets wet. But overall, that should be good. The door hinges right here and it goes over. Like I said, put that red tape on there to mark that wire as being 240 volt. Always want to make sure if you use the white and the black that you indicate it like this on both ends so the next person knows. All right, we got this thing unboxed, the evaporator side or the indoor side. It looks like the cable right here for the power is attached to this side into here. Then if you look on this side, right now this thing's upside down, but you see the bracket right here. This is the wall mounting bracket that we're gonna have to put on the wall to clip in. And then you got your refrigerant line and your drain right here. The refrigerant line is under this insulation right here, and then the drain. So we'll go ahead, lay this down, take it apart. Actually, I need to pop this bracket off first, so that way I have that bracket off of here. So it looks like there's a screw right here that holds it. So you unscrew that screw and then pretty much hop that thing off and then put it on the wall. Alright, I took off the tape just to look at the cover, just to make sure. So I've got my Wi-Fi dongle right here plugged into the USB, so everything looks good. This port right here is where you make your wiring connections. This looks like the display right here because it displays the temperature through the screen right here. So that's right there. So this pretty much looks pretty good from the inside. You can see the filters that it uses. So that thing is something that you want to periodically clean, this filter right here, because you'll get bugs and spiders and just junk in it. So you gotta take that off every couple months just to go ahead and clean it. What I was looking for was a template to drill and figure out where we're gonna mount it and everything, but I don't see a template in here, in this box at least. Maybe it's in the other box. So one of the things I noticed is this cable wasn't even connected to anything. It was just in the back of the box. It was just tucked there, so it looked like it was connected. But what you need to do is that little cover I showed you earlier, you have to take that screw off right there. It goes into here and exposes all the wires, and then there's another plate right here that goes over that cover with these screws right here, these 4 terminals, and then there's a strain relief right here, this white thing right here, that once you fish the cable through and you plug up these ends right here, you got these ends here that you got to screw into those terminals, and then you have to strain relief it so it doesn't pull out by accident. So that goes pretty much right there. This thing is going to be way too long for our application. I'm going to have to end up cutting it down and re-terminating these things. As far as the wires and the colors, you'll see that the heat shrink on this particular unit has 1, 2, and 3 on the actual heat shrink itself, and there's numbered terminals over there. So I'm assuming these numbers match those terminals over there. So without a template with this thing to actually hang on the wall and figure out where we're gonna have to drill, we basically have to measure our wall where we're gonna mount this, take the dimensions of this guy as far as where this edge is to this edge, and just create our own kind of markings or measurements, as well as the hole that we need to drill right here for this guy to go through the wall and outside. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and just take all these measurements and kind of mark them on the wall and see where they're at, and then hopefully everything lines up perfectly once we drill the holes and mount everything. The good thing with the bracket is you have a little bit of play as far as side to side goes. All right, I took all my measurements. I took this center point right here as a reference point, and I measured all the way to the edge here and to the other side. And then right here on the bracket, I actually marked where the line set and the drain go. So that way I know the area that I need to be within when I drill my hole. All right, we got that thing mounted up there perfectly right now. So I marked this thing 2 1/4 inches over from the edge of the bracket to the center of the pipes. So right there is where I'm gonna be drilling my hole. I'm gonna be drilling a 2 1/2 inch hole right here, which perfectly lines up with the center of the cinder block, the hollow part of it. So this is perfect. So we want to go ahead and cut this hole out, get the line through, and then we want a downward slope. So once we cut this through, we're gonna drill another hole so we can see on the other side where it exits. And then from there, we're gonna go ahead and drill the same 2 1/2 inch hole on the other side, on the outside, and then get that basically sloped down so it drains out and we get the line out. Man, that was a dusty mess. Look, good thing I had the vacuum here to catch most of that, but we still got dust everywhere. But we got that hole right there cut, 2 1/2 inch hole, perfect for what we need. So we'll go ahead and drill through to the other side and then drill on the back side to do the same hole on the outside. So correction on that, this is actually a 3 inch hole It's a 3-inch hole. I think last time when I did this, the little guard that it came with was 3 inches. So this is what I ordered for the last one. So this is perfect for these CMU blocks. So I went ahead and punched that out. The problem with punching out from the back side with that hole is that it knocks out all the stucco that is on the surface of this to get through it, but it does open up a little bit space for me to do my 3-inch hole. Once I do the 3-inch hole, I'm gonna have to go ahead and clean up and maybe fill in some of this back up just to make sure it doesn't spread, and then I have to refinish this to seal up this stucco. I don't want moisture getting into it. Alright, went ahead and test fitted it just to see how everything looks. So it looks like everything goes through nicely right here on this side, and on the inside everything clipped in nicely too. So I'm gonna fix this concrete right here and then finish this thing up in the morning. Everything fit perfectly right there, snapped in and clipped in nicely. So this thing is pretty much it for the indoor unit. We'll go continue this in the morning when we have more daylight on the outside, but this side is done for the most part. I'm about to take it back down because I still have all the grommets and everything to do behind there. Alright, we were able to take everything apart. It looks like the line set comes in 2 lines right here, and then it also comes with a short whip. This is the whip to your disconnect or your power source. This thing's 16 gauge, so it's probably not recommended for our use since we're running 12 gauge 20 amp, so you don't want to go lower. This wire would be the weak link in that. We go ahead and use a straight connection to a disconnect just to be safe. As far as these go, this line I'm probably going to end up having to cut shorter for my application because I'm not going to be able to use the whole length and I don't want to coil it up. So we'll go ahead and cut this down and flare it out later. So the unit itself comes pretty intact. It's got your valves here, so your 2 blacks right here, you connect those to your line set. This is your vacuum line right here. This is what you take apart. You pull a vacuum to make sure you get all the moisture and everything out of the line. Once you're satisfied and nothing leaks from the vacuum or pressure testing, if you choose to do pressure testing, then you go ahead and open this up and then you screw this thing out to release the refrigerant, because this thing comes pre-charged with refrigerant already, so you don't have to worry about filling it up. So you just release that into the line once you're ready. I was looking at the bottom of the thing once I picked it up, and here's where the putty and then that little shroud right there for your line set is. The putty is going to be on the outside. This one is going to be on the inside wall. Alright, got everything painted up the next morning just to make sure we have this all ready to go. I fixed all that concrete last night after we got that thing done, and it looks good now. So we'll go ahead and get the mounts on here and start doing the outdoor unit. So here's a mount I bought on Amazon. If you guys need this same stuff, go ahead and check out the links down in the description. I'll link everything I used on this project as far as the parts goes, the covers and everything, the tools and all that stuff that I use, because you're going to need some of these tools to do everything. It came with all the hardware you need. These anchors are probably not the best. I'm going to actually use real anchors I have laying around instead of these into the concrete block. But if you have something like wood and stuff that you could use these cheap ones that come with the kit, then you go ahead and try that out. But I want to make sure mine's nice and secure, at least for the 2 top ones that hold the most pressure. So for the mount kit, it comes with this header right here. So what you're supposed to do is basically level that header, mount it onto here, and it hooks right there on the edge here, and then you can slide it back and forth. But you really don't need the header. If you match these holes right here and just drill these straight into the walls on the actual bracket, you could just hang it without the header. You just got to make sure you level it before you put the second one on, so it's nice and neat and everything fits. And also you need to measure the distance between, so you don't have to worry about missing it on the actual unit when you hang it up. For my case, I don't want that header just because it's extra long and I don't need it. Plus it's just another piece that I have to work around. So I went and measured the bracket, made sure I had the clearance from the edge of the bracket to there by measuring what's on the actual thing. So I gave it about a 5-inch clearance from the box here over to make sure I clear the mini split once I put it onto here. And then I measured it where the bracket, I measured the 4 holes here, but I'm going to use the 2 down here, which are the horizontal holes that have horizontal adjustment versus vertical adjustment. And for now, I went ahead and used this level to get the exact same level 18 and 3/4 inch across here, which is the width of the mounting holes on the actual mini split. So I marked those for now just to be sure that I'm close. Once I get the first bracket on, I'm gonna make sure I level it, and then again measure these things and double check these holes again. For the anchors, like I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna use these real wedge anchors right here that are designed for concrete block. This is what I've used in the past inside to hold my heavy stuff. Even though this thing's only like 50 pounds, it should be fine using plastic ones, but I want to make sure I'm gonna get a permanent hold. Alright, went ahead and finished all these things. You got to make sure you drill deep enough, especially on the CMU, to clear your bolt. So on the top, I ended up putting those metal anchors I was talking about there. Don't push them all the way through because it might slip through. And on the bottom, since that's not really load bearing or weight bearing as far as holding the load, it's the bottom pivot of the static forces, and then there's a bumper and it rests down here anyway, so I use the plastic anchors down there. For these brackets, they come with this little rubber threaded pad on the bottom here. It's like a cushion. Just remember to put that in. I think that helps level it too. A lot of people that forget to put this end up not being level. Got everything bolted up on here on the wall. Make sure everything's nice and square. I got it level right there, pretty much level. It can maybe use a little bit, but that's good enough for this. Both sides of that, I measured the distance between the arms. We're at exactly 18 3/4, which is exactly what I need right here, 18 3/4 for the mounting of the mini split. You got everything set up, you gotta go ahead and prep all these washers and everything ready to go as far as the nuts and everything. I noticed the number of washers they give you is way too little for the number of bolts that need washers on this, because I already used 4 just for the bolts to the wall. Now I gotta find a bunch more because each one of these nuts and bolts right here need a washer once you put it on. And if you don't have enough, it's probably not gonna hold well just because of how big the holes are. Another thing you want to put in is this cross bolt right here. Once you're ready, it prevents it from popping up from the wind or anything else. So you want to make sure you put that on there with the washers and nuts on each side. I just brought it out here, put it on here just to test fit. Right now I got maybe like a foot, maybe like 10 inches from the wall, which is more than enough for this. A lot of people that install this really have it like almost to the dang wall right here. That's the reason why I got the 24-inch brackets. I wanted more room just because, of course, you want the airflow to go through here and then suck out right here. And this is where you reject the heat out from your condenser right there. So you want to get plenty of airflow around it as you can. So that's why I wanted to have it further off the wall. Even though these things are designed, I think it's only like 10 centimeters from the wall. I just wanted to be safe with this. So after I tightened down all the bolts right there for those cushions and everything, I measured the level again, and back there on that side it's a little bit closer to level, but if I move over here it's way off. So most of it is just how tight you go on these rubber things on the foots. And then also remember that little thing that adjusts out. I can also adjust that out more to go up higher, but right now I might just adjust the rubber feet to see if I could get that perfect. All right, I got that little cap in right there to cover up that bigger hole. It fits in and it kind of hangs below the unit a little bit. Once we get inside, I pulled that wire through, made the connections right there. So it's basically black, white, red. All the heat shrink is actually numbered to match the numbers up there, the 1, 2, 3, and then the ground. And then you wanna, after you're done with that, you wanna make sure you clip in this white thing right here. This is the strain relief. It keeps this wire from pulling out just in case. So you want to make sure that thing's screwed down so it keeps this wire harness in place. Once you do all that, you go ahead and put all these covers back on, all of this to cover it all up and seal this thing back up. One of the tools I recommend picking up for this project too is this tube bender, because when you come out of the wall, you're gonna have to bend it, and this thing will prevent that thing from crinking and crushing the actual tube by putting a nice curve onto it as you bend it out of that hole. So right now that line comes out right here, the short line or the small line right here, which is a hot line. So I need to bend it at a 90-degree coming down, and this one will connect to the new pipe. The other pipe right here is straight out, so I'm not gonna bend that line. I'm gonna bend the new line coming into here, and then I wanna make sure I bend that thing at a 90 towards the end, so that way when it comes out, I can just screw it right in and then come straight down from here. All right, so using that tool right here, I was able to bend it right there just enough to get it right around the edge out here without damaging anything. So pretty much that's good to go as far as the skinny line. Now I gotta get the big line. So the big line is gonna be, like I said, bent on the other end before I make the connection into here. All right, to prevent the lines from rubbing too much or busting a hole, like I said earlier, that butyl rubber didn't work really well, or that putty didn't work, so I just went ahead and got a piece of rubber right here, hose. I slid it down the middle and just slid it right through here just to shield against rubbing. So that should protect this line where it rubs or it's nearly touching, at least right here where the connections are made and everything, so that should be good there. For the covers, we want to go ahead and prep the top cover. So the top cover is pretty easy. It just kind of snaps over and covers everything. You drill 3 holes around it and you pretty much screw that in. What I usually do is once I screw this in, I'll seal around the top and the sides with silicone just to make sure that it doesn't leak out or get any moisture in it. And then pretty much that's it for that cover. Then we have to do the actual line cover. So the back piece right here goes behind the line and you don't really have to screw it into the wall or anything. You can drill holes and screw it in if you want to, just to make sure, but it pretty much snaps into this piece right here, which is a connector piece, and this thing actually screws into the wall right here, and from there you connect the next piece until you make the turn. You have an elbow which makes the elbow turn, so you could do that for the elbow, and then you get to like one of the end pieces. So this is kind of an end piece, and then from there you could use the flex. So you could do the flex, which kind of turns and goes towards the unit. All right, the next thing we need to do is go ahead and start uncoiling the actual line set. So I just needed it basically enough to go straight down from the wall, and then I'm going to need enough back here to turn. Once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and clip this thing, reflare the ends, and just have it shorter and exactly what I need for my particular application. A lot of people end up coiling this up and leaving it out there, which is kind of an unnecessary thing to do. There is a minimum they want usually on these line sets of like 10 feet from the evaporator to the actual condenser, but I might be a little short of that for this application. I just don't want to coil this thing up and leave it too much hanging around. Alright, now that I got these things bent out and turned like I wanted to attach it, you want to use this Nylog Blue right here. It's a gasket sealant made for refrigerant lines, and it's waterproof. And it's perfectly fine mixing with any refrigerant and anything that's going to be in contact with it. So this is always recommended when you do these lines. And before I even go there that far, I want to make sure I check the flares on these. So I actually have my flare kit over here. I just want to double check, maybe hit it a little bit more just to press the flare. All right, I was able to make these connections. I made this one over here and I just slid the foam up to match a little bit better with this one, but pretty much everything's pretty ready to go. You really should torque this, but I just don't have the torque wrench, so I'm just gonna send it. I basically had to hold that back right there with a like 16 or 17 millimeter, and then this one right here is a 22 millimeter on the flare nut, so you pretty much gotta do that. And then once you get that, everything should pretty much tighten up. And then right now I'm gonna leave it exposed. I should have left this one exposed a little bit because I need to test it later once I do the vacuum test, and then release the refrigerant to make sure that there's no bubbles or anything or any leaks coming through here. So you'll spray it with some soapy water. All right, so for my situation, I basically just have to check everything, make sure it ran straight down, and then you want to make sure you start doing the curve, get all your bends kind of roughed in so you know where you cut. So right now I'm going to cut it right about here as far as the insulation goes. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the tube and flare that right there. I need to get this thing on it off, but once I cut this off, I can pull the insulation off and then just pull that flare all the way through and then use it. So after messing around with the flaring, I realized I needed to get a much better HVAC specific flaring tool. So I got this one right here with a clutch. This one is off of Amazon. You could get these from anywhere from $50 to $90 depending on what you get. So I ended up getting this one for like 90 bucks, and it comes with metric and standard just in case I needed either one of these. It comes with a nicer cutting tool than the one that I got before, which was like an $18 kit. It was a very cheap generic kit. I also had a Harbor Freight kit that didn't really do much better, but this one has a clutch. It actually stops when you turn it, and then this thing puts a lot of force as a little thumb screw versus what they had on the other system. So this one works much better. It actually clamps on and it clamps the hose nice and tight using this thing right here with the grip on the ends. Overall, I really like this system much better. This right here is one of the old flares I did, and you can see it's kind of crappy. I did some new flares using this tool and it turned out much better. In addition to that tool, I got one of these deburring things right here. This thing is like $5 or $6, but this one will really help you clean out your pipe once you cut it and kind of open up the hole better before you do the flare. You need this because you need to clean out the inside and the outside edges, which is what this tool does, and it's much better than the ones that come with these kits. The ones that come with the kit is just like this little cutter, and you have to sit there and kind of rim the edge, and it's not as good and it's not as accurate as using something like this. So this right here was another one of the old flares because I was trying to test it to see how it was. Obviously it didn't grab it well and it burred up all the edges right here, and just the ends and crap looked like crap. So right here is one of my test ones with this new tool. You can see that flare is much bigger surface area and it's going to mate much better, and we should not leak after that. And you can see right there on the inside edge it's nice and smooth. There's no more roughness or anything, and do really well as far as the seal goes. So to start this, I'm going to pull it back and kind of line it up to where I need the new flare to be and cut it. Obviously my thing has a bunch of little nicks and everything right here from bending it and kind of getting it to shape, but hopefully that doesn't affect my flaring. So I'm going to cut it right about here for now and just kind of work with this part. You want to turn it and then twist this thing just like a hair every time you turn it, just to kind of clamp it down and turn and cut. You don't want to cut it too fast. Once you get it off, make sure you remove your nut because you're going to have to put that back on there before you flare the new thing out. You never want to forget your nut in there. So for the flare nut, you want to take that thing off and you want to make sure you clean this thing out first because we messed with it earlier. So even when you cut it, you want to make sure you get all the burrs and everything out of it. So I want to spray this down with some alcohol and acetone just to clean it all up. So the next thing you want to do is clean out the burrs. This thing, you want to make sure the thing faces down so any of the particles and everything that come out of it end up falling down and not back inside your tube. I'm gonna go ahead and take the vacuum after this, my regular vacuum, and vacuum it out too, just in case, because I want to make sure it doesn't leave anything that goes into the compressor and can destroy this thing. Clean it with some acetone. The reason why I like acetone is it's a solvent. It kind of cleans up everything and it evaporates really fast. All right, so we'll go ahead with the flare now. We'll put your nut on, make sure you get that thing through, kind of past all your turns and everything that you did previously. And then we want to get the clamp on to the right size. So this one, is it 3/8 or is it 5/16? All right, so we basically got that thing all flared up. Look how nice that thing looks now as far as that goes. It looks almost OEM, if not better. So we go ahead and pull the nut back and make sure it's seated perfectly into there, and then we can attach it and do the nylog and everything all over again. So once you pull it back in, you want to make sure that it gets perfectly good seating as far as all around the surface area of the nut, and there's no real movement and everything. So this thing looks pretty good inside as far as coverage and everything. So that's going to get a good, nice seal. All right, it's time to do the small line. I'll go ahead and just fast forward through this so you guys can see it better. All right, I made a little mistake on this first flare. It looks like I had the thing out too far and it made the flare too big, so now the nut won't go over it and inside the actual nut, so I have to actually cut this off and redo it again. All right, we were able to redo that thing, so now the nut actually slides over. It's nice and tight inside of there, so we're ready to reconnect now. So as I showed you earlier, we're gonna go ahead get this thing connected by undoing the lines right here. Gets a little bit of nylon onto the thread and the fitting to make sure that we get this thing sealed up nicely. If I didn't mention earlier, nylon is basically just dried up oil, refrigerant oil, that's gonna be compatible with the refrigerant. So you just need to put a little bit around the tip here and then around the threads, and it'll spread itself out as you tighten it down. So if you have a torque wrench, you need to re-torque these things down. I think the small nut, which is the small line, it's only like 8 or 9 foot-pounds. This top one is like 13 to 14 foot-pounds. So if you have an actual torque wrench, you should use that, but we don't, so we're just gonna use it by hand. Just hand tighten it to make sure. 9 and 14 foot-pounds is really not much pressure. So just be careful you don't overdo it and mess up your fitting and your flares. Go ahead and tighten the bottom one. Again, this one's supposed to be only 9 foot-pounds, so 9 foot-pounds is not much. That feels good right there as far as the test goes. We want to go this one again, 14 to 15 foot-pounds. So there, that's good. I'm gonna leave these a little bit exposed because again, we're gonna have to spray it with soap and water or later, just to make sure it doesn't bubble up or leak or anything. All right, I pulled that wire up into there, made the terminations right there. So it's black, white, red, 1, 2, 3, and then the ground. So line 1 and line 2 is the main coming from the disconnect. It's gonna come through here. There's a ground wire right back here for the ground. So that's where you're gonna put the ground coming from the disconnect. Other than that, instead of trimming this wire down, I actually just tucked it into the CMU wall up there. And then I'm gonna tuck anything left of it inside this Lineset cover, and that should be good there. All right, I went ahead and got the wiring and the flex right here all connected up. I use this elbow right here on the top, and then I basically put it across the bottom here. I put the anchors in and everything for the things. I came out over here and I'm gonna come into this grommet right here, the seal tight, and then go ahead and make all my terminations inside the box. So on this side, the ground, I went ahead and put a ring terminator on there so it can screw into that ground over here that I showed you guys earlier. That's the chassis ground right there. The other two I just spliced back. I'm gonna tuck into the terminals and just tighten it down. On this side, we pretty much finished the termination. So I got it on the outsides here, the red and the black. I grounded it to the ground bus right there. So this side's pretty much done. All right, made the final connections, did the termination right here just to make sure everything's strain relieved. As you can see, looks good right there. So after looking at the original mounts and the cushions that came with, I didn't really like them, so I ended up buying some of these off of Amazon right here. These are much better mounts, and they raised the thing about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches. They're gonna do much better as far as vibration dampening. So I went ahead and started getting all the mounts and everything for the cover on the line right there. So we measured it, made sure we got the right length. You have to drill this back piece into the wall right there, and this kind of clips in, and then the cover comes over, and there's screws that cover up. Before you do all that, you just remember to connect the drain hose for your condensate line. You want to get that all the way down to the bottom if you can, and then strip it out the bottom there. When I went ahead and hung this elbow right here for the turn, I went ahead and cut it a hole right here. They actually have like the little cutout or the little area right here that kind of shows exactly where to cut it. But you're gonna cut it there and then just bring the hose right down to this spot right here, and then just drip it out of this thing right here. So the back covers right here don't really come with any screws or anything to attach to the wall, so I went ahead and drilled 2 screws right there about a foot from the edge just to have it, and then I put this little hook here for my zip tie so I could pull everything against the wall so it's nice and flush. I did this on my last install just to make sure that this thing stayed in place and didn't move anywhere. So when we rent these from AutoZone or when you buy it new, you gotta make sure you have the original oil for this vacuum, and you wanna fill it up to the oil level line, and you always wanna keep it there just because you need that oil for the vacuum to operate properly and not burn itself out. These things get improperly run all the time without oil, and that's what kills a lot of them, which I don't understand how AutoZone can keep up with renting these out when people just destroy it every time they rent it out. So I filled it up. Pretty much the whole bottle needs to be emptied into there just to get it up to the level that you need it to be. And then, like I said earlier, this cap is actually vented right here, so that's why you need to keep this thing upright. The moment you tilt it over, that oil just drips into the vents and then drips all over the place. So make sure when you store that thing and transport that case, it stays upright. So when I was getting new stuff, I ended up ordering this thing too. So what it is this thing right here that screws onto the fitting right here. We're gonna vacuum, and we could take the core out of here using this little tool right here. You slide it in, you unscrew the core, and you slide it back past this valve right here. You close the valve, and then now you can vacuum the system a lot faster using this method, using this vacuum port on the side here. And then what you do is once you're done vacuuming, you open this thing back up, stick the core back in and tighten it down, and then you want to tighten that core inside here back down so that way you can seal it back up, and then you remove the fittings and everything to make it work. First thing you want to do is attach the fitting right here. This is the R134A or R32 fitting for the gauges and this thing right here. So you just want to basically just tighten that thing down so it's sealed up with the O-ring inside. Alright, once you tighten that down, you want to go ahead and attach this thing onto here. And then you have control of that thing right there to unscrew the actual core. And in reality, you could put the core in after the fact by using this whole system because of the way it's designed. You can unscrew this backside and just pull the whole thing out with the core, or put a new core in right there like that, right? And once you do that, you just close this thing up so that way you still have access to it. And then later on we could, like I said, seal this all up and put the core back in, put this thing back in like this right here, and leave it. You could just leave it right here actually sealed up. Technically this thing is sealed, the valve right here and the piston is sealed, so you don't have to worry. And you just leave that in there while you're vacuuming and all that stuff. Inside here there's also a core that you may want to remove also, because once again, once you put that core back into here, it's going to seal up, and then you don't have to worry about the leaking out of here because once you release everything. Alright, so we'll go ahead and connect this hose up to here and run the vacuum again. Alright, we got everything hooked up as I said. We'll go ahead and turn the vacuum on and then open up the vac line. Open that all the way. And then we'll go ahead and open the other line. And it goes straight into vacuum really fast now with this thing with no core up here. And it's gonna suck it out much faster. So we'll let this run for like an hour or so just to make sure that we get all the moisture and everything out of this thing. And then we'll revisit it and let it sit for another hour. Alright, I vacuumed this thing for a little over an hour, and I've let it sit for a little over an hour now after I disconnected it and turned off the pump, and it's held vacuum the whole time. So we're pretty good with this thing being airtight now. I'm gonna go ahead and put the valve core back in and release this thing and then get the refrigerant through. So I open this thing up, go ahead, get it in there, screw the valve stem back in, seal that up. Once that's good, I'll go ahead and pull this thing back out, close this thing up. The valve stem, the vacuum still holds, so everything's nice and tight. So we'll go ahead and unscrew everything and take this off. Alright, so the next step is to release the refrigerant from the condensing unit into the evaporator in the line set. So you've got an Allen key in here and a plug on each side. So what we need to do is basically get this thing in there, release the refrigerant into the line, and then let it fill up the line, and then we'll go ahead and turn it on and test it. So what you want to do is just go ahead, unscrew it. You could hear it release. And then you want to unscrew it, but remember there's really no stop to it, so you gotta be careful not to go too far out on these. A little stopper actually in there, but I don't really trust it to hold all the way, so you want to make sure you get it up to that edge and not go too far on that. So once you get that, put the caps back on, tighten these things up, so make sure they don't leak out or get tampered with. So next thing we want to do is go ahead and maybe run it just to make sure everything is working properly, and then we're going to leak check it by spraying some soapy water on the fittings and everything. First thing we'll do is go ahead, turn this thing, put it back to the on position, plug the disconnect back in. Once we do that, we'll go turn the breaker on the inside and get the remote. All right, so inside we got the remote. We'll go ahead and hit the on position. Right now it's in degrees Celsius up there. I'm not sure how you change it back. I'll figure it out, I guess. We'll go ahead and also set up the Wi-Fi and everything with the app, just to see what features we have on the app. But I'll mess around with this, and then I'll see what it discharges in a minute once this thing runs. So right now I got the unit inside running, but the fan out here is not doing anything. This is odd right here as far as what this thing is doing, because it's getting power and everything, so I don't know what's going on. All right, I got it into cooling mode, and the fans out here is actually spinning now, so we're actually doing some work. So we're shooting the discharge temperature, and it hasn't gone down yet, but it's slowly going down. Out here I could hit that thing right there, and the return line right now is getting about 59 degrees or so. That's a good sign. Yeah, the high pressure line is at 70 degrees, and then the fan is discharging 85 right now coming out of the fan, so things are looking good. We'll just give it a second to stabilize. So right now, discharge air, been running for a couple minutes, it's going down to about 63, 64. So that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and try to connect to Wi-Fi and figure out if I could change the units back to Fahrenheit from Celsius. Just as I suspected, this thing is made by AUX Home or AUX USA, and it's the same app that they use, which is AC Freedom. So you go ahead on the instruction booklet that came with this thing, there's a QR code back here that gets you to the instructions, and it tells you how to download the app and then enter the activation code for the app. Once you do that, then you just go through the process of connecting to your network to be able to hook that thing up. For this particular case, we have this remote with the happy face in the middle. So what you do is once you get in the app and you get through the process of registering and getting everything set up, you hit the happy face 8 times. 8 times basically resets the Wi-Fi up there and allows the app to start connecting and sending the Wi-Fi password to it. Basically during the setup, you enter your Wi-Fi password into the app and then it'll send it to the unit. It only works on 2.4 gigahertz, so if you have a 5 gigahertz network, it won't connect to that. Right now the remote is set up for Celsius, so it keeps on displaying Celsius up there. Right now we see 20 Celsius, and what I was doing was I was playing with the actual app. When I adjusted the temperature in the app in Fahrenheit, it actually sent this thing and converted this thing to Fahrenheit. So there is instructions for the remote, and I'm gonna go ahead and go through that and see if I can reset the remote. So if you look on the back of your remote, it'll give you the model number. This is the 009E, and that's the first QR code right here, so you just scan that for the instructions online. All right, so I did a bunch of research, and it looks like this particular remote is only Celsius, no Fahrenheit. So in the US, this is gonna suck if you don't care for it. Just make sure you just keep it around 20 degrees Celsius or maybe even 18 degrees Celsius, and it'll run cold all the time. What I ended up doing was just integrating the app with my Google Home. So now you just control it with the Google Home app and voice control, and then I've also set a schedule on it to turn off whenever I forget to turn it off at night. So that's pretty much all I'm going to do there for the remote. This thing, I'm just going to tuck it away. It didn't come with a case or anything to put it in or hang it, so I'm just going to put it away in a drawer whenever I need it. Also, you want to check to make sure this thing's draining properly for the condensate. Right now that tube looks like it's draining well, so we're good here. It's important to make sure that thing drains. To test this for leaks, we'll go ahead and just spray some soap and water around the nozzles here and see if there's any bubbling. Gotta kind of push the insulation back just in case, but you should just kind of soak it, make sure you get all the little edges there. So I've sprayed it all wet right there, so no leaks, no bubbles coming out from the edges or any of the threads or anything. Same with the bottom, the soap's kind of sitting there. If there was a leak, you will see those bubbles kind of float up and go big. So up top here, we're gonna have to do the same thing. Spray some soap around the edges here and see if it bubbles up. So sprayed it there, don't see any kind of leaks or anything coming out of that one. Same with this side, sprayed it. I think we're pretty good as far as no leaks on this. So I'll go ahead and seal this thing back up, get the putty, get the insulation and all that stuff kind of buttoned up inside this hole and put the cap on. So I went ahead and caulked around the top there to make sure the moisture stays out of that cap. I also hit the screws and everything with a little bit of touch-up paint, just some white touch-up paint so they don't corrode. I don't trust these China screws to stay uncorroded. Hey guys, thanks for joining me all the way to the end of this video on setting up this mini split, doing all the wiring, the vacuuming, cutting the lines and everything. As you can see, it took me several days to do this just because I ran into a bunch of issues. Plus, I only had a few hours a day to work on each step, so I had to get in as much as I could, record what I could during the day, at night, or whenever I could get to it and get it all installed. But as long as you have all the correct tools and the correct parts and everything to begin with, everything goes pretty fast and you could do this in a day or less. Go ahead and check out the links down in the description. I'll link all the parts and everything that I used on this project, including all the tools I needed to make everything work. This thing started as a $421 mini split, but with all the parts and all the accessories and tools I needed to do it, it probably ended up adding up to around $600 or $700 all said and done. But check out the links down in the description. I'll list all the parts and everything I need. If you guys found this video useful, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to your channel, go ahead and subscribe to your channel to stay on top of all my different DIY videos, whether it's on the house, on the cars, or whatever I'm doing in the garage. If I can do it, you guys can do it. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.